Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a designer here at Mako. Today we will be painting a sunflower plate. This is my favorite technique here at Mako. What you do is you glaze the whole plate in black, and then you transfer your pattern and you put elements glazes over the black. And what that does is it creates depth to your design. So you'll have a darker shade of the color going around and then a lighter in the middle. So I think this is really neat, and it's really neat technique for doing portraits like this, because you automatically get the light on the high areas and then the dark on the low areas. So I'll be showing you how to make the sunflower plate today. So the first step is to take your foundation's black, and what we're going to do is we're going to glaze 3 coats on the back of the plate, and then we're going to be doing 2 coats on the front. And you only do 2 coats on the front instead of 3 because you're going to be putting the elements glazes on the front, and you don't want too much glaze because then it could crawl. So we're going to start with the back. I'm using the foundation's glaze as a base glaze for this plate because they're easier to use over large areas. They go on real smooth and even. The stroking coat's a little thicker, so it's a little harder to get coverage on a large area. It'll still work. You could do this with stroking coat, but it's just easier to glaze a large piece like this with foundation's glaze. So I'm going to wait for that first coat to dry. And then once you just see so you can see some areas are still shiny, you just wait for that shine to leave, and then you know it's dry enough to put a second coat on. Okay, so that's mostly dry, so I'll start my second coat. Okay, I'll wait for that to dry and then add a third coat. Okay, so now I'm going to add my third coat on the back. Once the third coat is dry, I can flip the plate over and start on the front. Okay, so now we have our 3 coats on the back. So we're just going to do 2 coats on the front. You want to make sure you get the edge too, that you don't leave any bisque showing through on the edges. I'll let that first coat dry. We'll apply our second coat. So now our first coat is dry, so I'll apply my second coat. Now I'm just kind of smoothing out my brush strokes just so it dries evenly. It will all level out when it's fired, but I just want it to dry evenly. And then while the second coat is drying, I'm going to cut our pattern out. I have a sunflower pattern here, and what I'm just going to do is just kind of cut around the pattern so it fits better on the plate, not actually cut out each leaf or anything, but just kind of make it more circular going around the sunflower. Then you don't have extra paper you have to worry about folding over the plate. Just cut it out like that. So when that's dry, it just needs to be dry to the touch. We'll put this pattern down and trace over it with a pencil. But the tricky part is, when you make your first line, you'll want to check to see how deep your line is, because you don't want it to go all the way. You don't want to press down so hard that you go all the way to the bisque and you're scraping off all the glaze. You just want to be able to see a faint line in the glaze so that you can tell where your pattern is. Okay, so our second coat is dry now, so I'm going to put the pattern. The tops of the leaves here are cut off on the pattern because they're on the edge of the plate. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot those up to the top edge. I'm just going to start in the center here. And you really don't need to apply that much pressure. It's real light. Then I'll lift it up and check. See? Yep, you see the circle there? And you don't see any white from the bisque coming through, so that's what you want. And it's really, you're really not pressing down that hard, pretty much just kind of tracing over the paper. And once you find what pressure works good for you, then just go over the rest of the pattern. And it's nice if you can have a banding wheel like this so that you can just rotate the plate as you're working. Okay, back to where I started, so I'm going to go down stem and the leaves down here. So sunflowers all traced. Now I'm going to take AC 302 wax resist. I'm going to put just about a teaspoon onto a palette. About that much. You really don't need a lot of it. And I'm going to be applying it with the RB100 detail brush. You could really do it with any detail brush. You really need just a small line. It's a little more difficult when you get the liners that are longer than this because it'll want to get away from you kind of as you're going around the pattern. So it's best to go with a shorter brush like this one. And you don't want to get the wax resist on your clothes because it will not come out of your clothes. So just be careful with that. And you're just going over the pattern you just made. And you really don't have to be super precise or anything. If you get one area that's a little thinner or thicker, the glazes are going to melt and kind of cover some of the line anyway, so it's fine if you're not very precise with this. You just want to make sure that there is a line in between so that your glazes your different colors don't run together. Okay, now that I have the pattern all traced with the wax resist, I'm going to go around the edge of the plate with the wax resist. So that I have a black rim going around my plate. Because anywhere where the wax resist is will be black because it's covering up the black, and it just gets fired off in the kiln. So when you get your piece out, the areas that you have the wax resist will just be black, and you'll have the areas of color around it. And you don't have to be precise going around the edge either because it's just not a very precise technique. Actually, the less precise you are, the better it's going to turn out, which is not the case for most techniques. Okay, and people will keep a designated brush for their wax so that if there's any residue after you clean it, that you're not going to be putting regular glazes on it and having the wax in there with it. So I usually keep my wax brushes separate from my other brushes. Okay, so first color we're going to do is EL-128 wheat. This is the yellow in the sunflower. So we're going to do the inner petals, the yellow. So I'm going to shake it up and use a script liner brush. The number is RB106. And I'm just going to apply 2 coats to each of the inner petals. And this is part of what I said before about this is not a precise technique. The less precise you are, the better, because as I'm brushing this glaze on, if I'm not brushing an even coat, it's going to create more color variation. So you really don't, like normally I'd want to, just plop a coat down and even it out. But this, you really don't want to do that. You just want to put the glaze down. If you have high areas, low areas, that's fine. It'll actually make it look better. Okay, so I'm back around. That is not quite dry enough for a second coat yet. So I'm just go ahead and put this glaze to the side and get out EL-143 cactus flower. This is the orange element glaze. Shake this up So I'm going to go ahead and put a coat on the outer petals of the flower. And one thing that's difficult about the elements glazes when you're doing something like this is that they're all pretty much black. So you have to kind of remember where each color goes. Or if you just want to work with one color till the end and then move on to the next color, that's fine too. But I just use the plate as a reference to where each color goes. Okay. And the cactus flower also goes around the outer circle of the center. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to our yellow wheat color and add a second coat. Our first coat's dry. I'll just repeat what you did. Now I'll go back to the cactus flower and put a second coat on it. Almost done with this, and we will be coming back with both these colors to do a third coat. But we are going to move on to the other color before we do that because we want this to be pretty dry before we add the third coat, because it's not just a regular third coat, there's something special about it. And that's why I wanted to make a video about this project, because it's really hard to write how to do the third coat in just written direction. So I'm going to move on to the grass, EL-142. And this is in the center of your flower and the stems and the leaves. So I'll do 2 coats like we did with the other colors. Let that dry for a second and do a second coat. Okay, now we're going to do our second coat of the grass, which is a green element. Now we will move on to our background color. And it is EL-130 sea green, and this is a pretty bluish green color. So normally on a background like this, I'd be using a soft fan brush because it's a large area and you want it to be even. But for this, we're still using the script liner because we don't want our coverage to be even. You also don't want to do your brush strokes all the same direction either, because then it'll look too uniform. You want to have them go in different directions. Okay, and when I get back around to where I started the first coat, it's dry enough to go ahead and start putting the second coat on. So I'm going to go around the plate again. Okay, now we have 2 coats of that. We will start over with our first color and do the third coat. So that was the EL-128 wheat, the inner petals of the flower. So with the third coat is what you do is you go in about 1/4 inch from the edges and you're just laying down a bunch of irregular glaze, just like kind of plopping it down on there. And you want to be kind of erratic when you're doing it. This is what creates that brighter color in the center of all the areas. Like on the plate here, you can see that bright yellow in the center here. That's what that third coat is doing, is it's adding that bright color, and then it kind of goes down to darker as you go away from that. That's what gives you the depth of this technique. It's very easy to do, but it's hard to write that in directions. Okay, so there's the wheat. We're done with that now. And our cactus flower, EL-143, that's the orange. It's the outer petals. And don't be afraid if it gets kind of blobby looking, it will flatten out. Now we'll go around the center here with the third coat and just try to make a line going in between. Okay, so that is all the cactus flower. Now we'll move on to grass. That was the center for our flowers. Just plop some glaze down the center. The stem, you'll just make a line going down stems. And then in the center of the leaves. Okay, that's all for the grass. Now for our background color, the sea green. And this will just be a 1/4 inch from each section of the background. So like if you have this section here is kind of by itself, so you'll do a 1/4 inch from the edge of that section. Like these little tiny sections, you'll just do like a kind of little dot in the middle of them because it's a really small section. You're just pretty much trying to stay away from the very edge, get the most glaze in the center. And this color is kind of neat because the 2 coats is going to look more blue, and the 3 coats is going to look more green. So you'll kind of have a greenish color in the center here where you're putting this 3rd coat. Okay, that's all for the background color. Sea green. Okay, now we are done with our plate, so you're just going to want to stilt this and fire to cone 06, and you'll end up with this plate. I wanted to share also that this plate and this plate have the FN black as the background, so it makes the colors kind of darker. What you can also do is use FN brown, and you get a similar look, but they're a little lighter and kind of like a sepia kind of tone to them. What I'm going to do here in the near future is experiment with using other darker colors like dark blues, dark reds, to see what results I get with that. So hopefully there'll be some more projects coming your way with different variations of this technique. I hope you enjoy. Thanks. As always, make it Mako.